This is Kirk from Crestwood, Kentucky. The perfect time for me to listen to Scandal Water Podcast is when I'm out for a run. Being entertained while I'm running helps the miles fly by.
Welcome to Scandal Water, where the tea is hot and the conversation lively.
Your hosts, Candy
And Ashley,
will discuss a peculiar story somehow related to the entertainment industry. This podcast might not change the world, but it just might satisfy your thirst for an intriguing tale.
Oh, it's that time of day. Tune in and hear what the ladies say. It's time to bend your ear when the silver screen appears. Stories about the stage and screen and everything in between. So come on and join the fun. The curtain opens in 3, 2, 1.
Hello, Ashley.
hello, Candy. I feel like I just saw you.
Crazy how that worked, isn't
So
it?
weird.
Yeah, just we're going to be real. We thought this was going to be a single episode.
We did.
And then realized as we were talking about the 1993 remake, The Fugitive, starring Harrison Ford and Tommy Lee Jones, that this was way too much
It was
to
too
be
big.
one episode.
There was too much love to be had in one.
So in the moment, we decided to go ahead and stop. And if you have not yet heard it, go back and first listen to last week's episode, because that's part one.
As the history of the actual TV show and a little bit about the making of it. And this is just going to be us basically waxing poetic about how much we love this movie, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Which
a lot
was
of our
originally supposed to be
own
the-
analysis. And
Yes. It was supposed to be after the break, we're going to talk about this. And then we thought they don't want to sit with us for 2 hours.
That's right.
They just don't.
That's a bit much.
As long as the movie. Our episode was going to be as long as the movie itself.
So here we are now.
Yeah.
This is us talking just about our impressions, because we have both done a recent rewatch of the
Yes.
movie.
Yes.
Which I appreciated greatly, by the way.
It was
yeah.
a 2 rewatch for me because I had seen it. The reason when we talked about what should we do for November, how about our favorite things, and I immediately said The Fugitive, not only because it was on my mind, but I had seen it just the week before, watching it with my mom, and then I watched it again on this past Sunday. Loved it.
Yeah.
Didn't get bored.
It's a really great movie.
It is.
It really is. Well, then let's just kind of do as we've done with some other movies when we're analyzing them. Let's just go back and forth and bring out some different points that struck us.
Okay.
Do you want to start, since it's your favorite thing?
Sure. So I just took notes as I was watching it, and you guys know that I love watching the credits. Well, if you don't know, I will tell you now. I love watching the credits. And these opening credits / font and music are very 80s and 90s to me. They love those synth in those days. But I gotta say, I do like the flashlight effect in the font. You know, there's somebody searching and you see the blue going across the font. It's a very dramatic way to pull you in. And I thought it was a really smart way to start the film from a writing point of view with the inciting incident.
Absolutely. I wrote the same thing.
Yeah, we have the attack intercut with wide views of the city. And it really was an excellent opening credits sequence because we see everything that's going on.
Absolutely.
And I really do appreciate that they show Helen in negative, because this is a very brutal, bloody attack, and it could turn people off if you're seeing this horrible event, but they show her in like negative. So you can't tell how it's black and white negative.
That is actually my very first note as well. The fact that they started with the murder, the photo negative choice, I thought was not only, I didn't even think about the fact that they were being respectful of us and not giving us graphic details. I was thinking of it more as the fact that it was kind of disconcerting. And I wondered if it was a nod to the fact that the Fugitive movie
Was in black and white?
was in black and white.
That's very true.
But any way you look at it, I was so engaged. This was so fast paced. It was so tense action. Like, it set the scene. We are going to be nonstop from the word go. And just to kind of finish that out, they were still rolling credits 13 minutes later when Richard Kimball was heading to jail.
I know.
Like,
I know.
that's how much happened, how much action took place in the beginning of this movie.
I wrote down that no words are spoken until the news reporter, but between the news reporter and the images ahead of time, we know everything going on. So he's telling us Richard Kimball's been arrested and this is
Yes.
what's going on. And it was going back to the behind the scenes that we kind of talked about in the last episode, they started off with it being 3 hours long. So they had to make these brutal choices. And some of the choices that they made were they cut this down to just seconds. So they had the whole trial and they had all of this stuff. And they just said, okay, we got to cut it out. But that was so smart to me. We get to it. We get to the chase.
Because let's be honest, I mean, thinking about this from a writing angle, exposition can get kind of boring sometimes.
It can.
And this just made it move so quickly. And really, this is a movie about a man being relentlessly pursued, trying to prove his innocence.
Right.
We needed this exposition and this backstory to happen fast. But I appreciated that even with it moving that fast, they found ways. It wasn't just in the beginning, it actually occurred later in the movie as well. But they found ways to show the relationship between Harrison and his wife, because we needed to feel their relationship. We needed to feel their love.
I have on here the fundraiser dinner reminded me of the fundraiser dinner in Return to Me.
Yes,
which was also set in Chicago. And I don't know if you noticed, but Mr. Richard Kimball's lawyer is Dick Cusack, who is in Return to Me.
I did not notice.
Yes, he's his lawyer, and he's the one that in Return to Me says, "Did you know about my anonymous sizable donation to the gorilla exhibit?" That's him.
Yeah. Nice.
For those of you who remember our episode on Harrison Ford and how we had this whole thing about how Harrison points, I wrote down, Harrison points during the interrogation. You find that man. He
so
does
funny.
this pointing. I was like, there it is. There's the point.
You know, staying with Harrison for a minute, I made a note about his acting. I mean, he was amazing throughout. I could sit here and talk about him for an hour. But when I was thinking about and noticing him as he was being interrogated, he was just sitting there. He was pulling at the hair at his beard underneath his lip, but the grief rolling off of him. I was thinking, he's sitting there. Like, other than pulling at the facial hair, this man is not even moving.
Right.
And he was just exuding confusion, grief. I don't even know what to do. I mean, I was blown away.
And I also got to give a shout out to the man who's questioning him. I don't know the actor's name. I don't think he did a lot of stuff. I tried to look him up to see what other things he'd done, but he's like, who was there? What did he look like? What's going on? And he's just keep hitting him with these questions. What do you remember? What did she look like? What is this? And he's just like overwhelmed. So the two of them worked really well to give us that I'm overwhelmed with what's going on.
Well, and to piggyback on what you said, it also, as I was listening to that exchange, I'm like, and this is how he is sounding more guilty. And this is how we are literally seeing the accusations.
Did she have life insurance? Who's the beneficiary? Well, I am. Anybody else? You know, it's just like, oh my goodness.
Yeah, you could see their suspicions were elevating, and you could see it just getting darker and darker for his situation. Yeah.
And speaking of the editing, I really liked how they intercut the courtroom scene with Richard coming home and finding his wife. It's just another way for us to keep this action rolling.
And I noted that as well, because that was a choice that they made that I appreciated to intentionally show Harrison's innocence. I recognize this was a different time period, right? This was 30 years ago that they're making this movie. But nowadays, the trend is to have these unreliable narrators and to have you question the innocence of the person who's being accused. But the choice was made from the very beginning. We want the audience to know he's innocent. They're showing us these flashbacks. He clearly didn't do it. There clearly was a one-armed man.
You're right.
We never doubted for a moment that this was a wrongly accused man. As an audience member, we are 100% on his side. And that was something that I think was important, because that's half the impact of this movie is how much you are rooting for this wrongly accused man. And also you like his pursuer. You're hoping it's going to come around.
Yeah.
You know?
I think the most damning evidence that they have is that 911 call where she says, and they play it in court, he's trying to kill me.
Right.
Richard, he's trying to kill me. But I think punctuation is important there.
Right.
I think she says it as a period. It should have been a comma.
Right.
Like, Richard, he's trying to kill me. Not Richard, he's trying to kill me. That makes sense?
Yeah, and the fact that we were seeing it in flashback, we had no doubt how that played out. But you could see how the jury would have convicted him. Yeah.
So I wrote 12 minutes into the film, because I paused it to see, and we have everything set up for our main plot of The Fugitive, which is to me, a really great lesson on getting to the story fast. I'm not sure that we could have gone any faster
Right.
and understood everything going on to the full capacity. I think it was perfect.
Absolutely.
Okay, so Brian was rewatching this with me, and we both had a question. I'm going to throw this at you.
Okay.
Is there an uncertain amount of time before he's taken upstate? You know, we have the conviction, and then we jump to he's being loaded onto the bus. Brian asked me, is that the night he was convicted, or do we think a little bit of time has passed? Because of the way he talks to the other prisoner, he says to him, be good. So did he know that guy, or has he been sitting in jail through the whole trial? What do you think as far as the timeline goes?
That is such an interesting question, because I didn't even think about that
Yeah,
in the
I didn't
moment.
either until he asked me. He said, do you think this is the same day, or has there been time that's passed?
I have no basis for this, but I would have answered just off the top of my head. I would have said this is very soon after his conviction.
That's what I thought too.
Yeah, I feel like I think part of it is just because everything else has moved so fast that I feel like this moved fast as well. I just have that sense of this ball rolling down the hill, and it's just like everything's just picking up, you know?
Right.
And so my instinct is that if it's not the same day, it's very soon after.
Very soon after, because we do learn later in the movie, and he brought this up too. We learn later when they're interviewing the one-armed man, he says, I was asked all these questions a year ago. So we both think that, I think Helen was killed in January or sometime when it was cold, and this is the following January that he
Which
is...
it's going to take a while for a trial.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But in my head, you know, I was like, oh, she was killed. And then 10 minutes later, you know, because I'm thinking of the way the movie is going. But I think he was probably in jail there while the trial was going on, where he got to know these other people. And then the day he's convicted, he was loaded onto this bus.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think that makes absolute sense.
Okay, I just want your opinion too.
You mentioned the bus ride.
Ooh, that bus ride.
Oh my goodness. Like, I'm telling you, I've said it already, I'll say it again. This was so fast paced. The tension. The tension.
I knew it was going to be fine, but I
feel.
still was really, really stressed for him.
Like, it just does not let up. And you love it. Like, you love it. I appreciated the fact, first of all, that they had the nods, right? They had the nods to the 1960s show, the fact that they had, you know, the bus leads to the train, right?
Yes.
We have the train made it in there. We had the pursued. The fact that he was the man of character, and that idea of risking his own well-being or his own escape in some cases for the sake of others, that comes out on this bus ride, right?
Because he saves the guard.
He saves the guard.
And nobody else will help him.
That's right. But he risks everything.
Yes, he does. His own life.
Yes.
To take those couple extra seconds to save that man. And when the guy that looks like Wilford Brimley, but is not Wilford Brimley, when he gets out that shotgun, I was like, sir, you have just escalated this. You did not have to do that.
Yeah.
So he's the one that shoots the driver.
Right. Which I think is another point. I think it's so important to this story and to the original TV series as well, that Richard Kimball has to be almost this ideal man.
Yeah.
He has to be so far up on that pedestal of high moral character that we are just almost in awe of him. Like, we are so rooting for him. And so I think by comparison, they keep showing us these other people who are cowardly or unethical or making terrible choices. And by comparison, he is always the one where you're like, he's the hero.
He's going to make
He's
the right
hero
choice
in every moment.
Yep.
Yeah. Loved it. But the tension. And then when that train coming, which let's talk about, this was something that came up, and I know it was in the video as well, that they had to do a real train crash.
Yes.
Yeah, it was a big thing. They had one chance to do it. They were using a real train. So Andrew Davis, the director, they worked with engineers. They had to set stunt people. They did have Harrison Ford stand in front of like a blue screen.
Absolutely.
Right, of course.
He's Harrison Ford.
But, other than like his jump, everything else is real. This is a train crashing.
I know.
Yeah, and that was something that they pointed out. I'll just follow that down the road for just a tiny bit. They did not have the special effects that we use today. These were not available to them. Sometimes it was a choice, but most of the time it's like they just didn't have the same access. So much of this movie was real.
It was, and I loved
just
it.
real. Yeah.
The behind the scenes video I mentioned in our first episode, to say it again, it was the making of The Fugitive was a bleep show. and I'll put it in the show notes, but they said during this scene, okay, so the studio wanted shots of Harrison running through the woods to use as promo footage because they're they're, speaking of a train, they are barreling forward with promoting this film. It's going to come out in August. You're shooting in February, but it's coming out in August. So he's running through the woods and he tears his right ACL, and he does not have time to have surgery and 6 weeks of recovery. So he actually physically limps for most of this film, which actually adds to his character because he was, and maybe that's why they added that he had that injury on his hip so that there'd be a reason why he's limping.
Right. And also so he could take off his shirt and
right. when mom and I saw it, she's like, oh, well, that's a lot of Harrison.
It was a lot of Harrison. But in that hospital part, they were just so smart with the way, I don't know, it's like they found every moment to keep the tension high. Like the near misses. Yes. It was like so good. When he's in the hospital room of that old man and you
Eat your food, Mr. Johnson, or whatever his name is. I'm like, that man is in a coma. Someone else is eating his food and drinking his drink.
Well, Harrison was. I mean, Richard Kimball took a little bit of it. But it's just constantly, like every moment, it was just this near miss. Or actually, he passed that one fella who's carrying the fax that identifies him, and they have an interaction.
I know.
It was just,
he said, you see anybody like that every time I look in the mirror? I said that for being new with this fugitive stuff, Richard is really intuitive about taking clothes and shaving and doing all of this. I was like, that's crazy. I want to back up just a second because, again, for the timestamp, to me, the man of the hour, Tommy Lee, enters at 20 minutes. It's 20 minutes before we see him, and in my humble opinion, a good movie becomes a great movie once he enters. That listen up, ladies and gentlemen, outhouse, hen house, dog house, and that music swelling. I was like, oh my gosh, take all my money right now. Take all my money.
He's just a scene stealer. You know, his we would call it stage presence. I mean, for film, I'm not sure what you call it, but he just commands your attention. When he walks into the scene, you're just like, you're focused on him.
I can't take my eyes off of him. He's so good. Did you know that you can still tour that wreckage? They left it there.
Oh, really?
It's still there.
Seems like that would be a little bit of...
Well, the actor that played Biggs in the behind the scenes video, he goes back and it's still there. He falls down the hill and face plants, so he's like bleeding. He's like, I found it, but he's like all covered him.
It feels like that would be a pollution thing, or like
you've got
to clean up your mess.
I know
kind of thing.
definitely the bus is there. What are they going to do with it? And it became a tourist destination.
Well, and I guess in that respect, then it worked. But you know, just to linger here for just a moment, I can't help it. I mean, I'm just gonna say it. It's 2024 now. These fellas don't look the same. No, none of us look the same.
Yeah.
It was to see them in their prime. Tommy Lee Jones, so fit, so active. So, I mean, like both of them. I just had a moment of just taking that in, just appreciating them.
Okay, here's another question for you. Something that came up with Mom, and then I asked Brian's opinion. She asked, why is he wearing blue jeans? And because everybody else is wearing like utility pants, but Tommy is wearing blue jeans. To me, I thought it was playing into that whole, he's called Wyatt Earp. You know, when the sheriff says, Wyatt Earp's here to save the day, I think it played into this.
I'm going to be different.
I'm going to be different.
I'm going to do it my way.
He stands out from all the other workers. They're all wearing like khakis or black. Because Brian said, what do you want them to wear? Like dress pants? I said, but look, they're wearing utility pants or something that's not blue jeans. He's the only one in blue jeans.
I didn't even notice, but it makes sense. He's going to do it his way. He's going to be different. Yeah. Interesting. I'm maybe jumping a tiny bit.
Okay.
But the misdirection was amazing when we thought we had seen Harrison get into the car with a woman.
Oh, yeah.
And then suddenly we see the U.S. Marshals coming in ready to take down. They've caught him. They've got him. They're going to go get him.
And they say he's in because it was a woman that picked him up, they say he's in the room with some woman. And you're like, no, Harrison would never do that. Or Richard Kimball would never do that. And it's Copeland,
which I'm going to tell you was a huge issue for me. Like, you know how it is. You're if you're thinking, and this movie, you said it earlier, this movie asks you to think. It wants you to think. So as you're going through this movie, that was a stumbling block for me. I'm like, why are we going after Richard Kimball when other people escaped as well? We know Copeland escaped.
Yeah.
What about him? Does nobody care about him?
Like, we just didn't see it. Of course they're chasing him. We just don't see it.
We didn't see it. And so when I I saw that they were actually going after Copeland, I was like, well, thank you. Okay. And it made perfect sense. But this also ties back to your point about Wyatt Earp. When Tommy Lee Jones shoots the man who is holding his buddy.
And you know what? He was being good. To Copeland's credit, Harrison tells him, be good. He goes home. He's with his woman. He's not making trouble. I mean, he has a future from the law. But
he has escaped.
He has escaped, but he's not out causing problems. He just went home to his lady. He was being good.
Yeah.
So, sorry, Copeland.
Yeah, I should have identified it. It was him who was killed. And when his U.S. Marshal friend, who's being held by Copeland...
Noah Newman.
Oh, is that his...
That's his name.
Okay.
His character name.
When he questions Gerard about that,
Yes.
he says, I don't bargain.
I don't bargain. Yeah.
I mean, like, this is who this man is.
And it sets it up because it tells us Richard's in a whole lot of trouble.
Oh, yeah. Like, the character development we've got it going on both ends.
Yeah.
They are doing such a good job of developing the characters of two different men.
There's two sides of the same coin.
And I love the decision because as we talked about this in the episode last week, right? That Jeb Stewart was the screenwriter who was like, no, we don't want Gerard to be the villain. We don't want him to be the bad guy. That doesn't serve this story. We need him to actually be, as you said, another admirable guy, a guy who can think, who's doing his job, who's somebody that we can root for once. And, we want him to figure it out. We want him to get on the side of Richard Kimball.
I wrote that Richard doesn't really say much in this film. I mean, he says a little bit, but most of the time he's just trying to stay alive. But Gerard does a lot of talking.
Oh, yeah.
And both work well for their characters because Richard is in survival mode while Gerard's a dog on the hunt. Neither one is going to give up. They're like opposite sides of the same coin. But watching Gerard, I was like, I want to be on his team. I want to work with him.
They had so much fun.
They
seem to care about each other.
Yes, and that's what I said. They obviously really care about each other, and every day at work would be really exciting. I think it would be fun to work with him.
Absolutely. In fact, you know what? I'm going to follow up on that because I found a quote that I loved. Andrew Davis, again, the director, he said, an executive at Warner Brothers said to me, what do you need all these people around Gerard for? Just give him a sidekick. And I said, no, you need to have this palette of people of color, of different sexes, of ages, the guy with the ponytail and everything like that Tommy could play off of, and he becomes the papa to this group of people.
Right. Yes.
Okay, so let's just, I'm like fleshing this idea out in my head as I'm talking. That's the thing. It's not just a foil, right? It's not just something to move Richard Kimball's story forward. Tommy Lee Jones, his character has its own story arc. Yeah. He has his own relationships. These people have their own thing going on separate.
Yeah.
But then their mission is, related to, of course, Richard Kimball.
One of the cute lines, or if it's an ad lib or not an ad lib, I think it's Cosmo. He says, "Why are you yelling at me? Why don't you yell at her sometime?" And then Tommy Lee yells at somebody. He's like, "Attaboy, good, yell at them." Because just that exchange between them, you could see how much they just like care about each other. And instead of saying, "Go get me a donut," he says, "Why don't you think me up a cup of coffee and a little donut with some sprinkles on top?"
Yes.
Yeah, that's just so much. That has so much more nuance than "Give me a donut and a cup of coffee."
Flavor.
It just shows their relationship. And even going back to the original point of him telling the kid, Noah, I don't bargain, but he cares about him. He clearly cares about him. And later on, you can see that their relationship kind of deepens because he tells him, "Well done, son." And he's like, "Thank you, sir."
Yeah.
They really respect him, and they want him to respect them too.
Yeah. Well, I may be jumping a little bit, but I'm going to go to the point to where Gerard realizes that Richard Kimball had gone to the prosthetics department. Why would he come back to this hospital? Why would he be doing this? And when we see him start to recognize there's something going on, he said there was a one-armed man. He's actually coming back to this. He's seeking out.
Then he starts investigating too.
Yes. I mean, as an audience member, that was so satisfying. Like, I think my point is, because I'm talking in circles, I think my point is my emotional investment in this story. The fact that I would get that excited to be like,
he's figuring it out.
He's starting to get it. He's gonna be on Richard's side too. It was a big thing. Like, it kind of gave you chills a little bit.
I want to back up just a second, and then we'll go to where you were. I wrote about the exchange between them in the aqueduct.
Oh, okay, yes.
So I said this in the last episode, but in case you didn't listen to it, there's this iconic exchange of, I didn't kill my wife, and he says, I don't care. And why doesn't he care? Because he's not in charge of the justice system. He's only in charge of bringing in fugitives. He says later, I'm not trying to solve a puzzle here. But then he does try to solve the puzzle. And so seeing the two of them on screen together, I said there is something so electric about seeing Richard and Gerard, or Harrison and Tommy Lee, in scenes together because they have so few of them.
Right.
And as a little aside, to me, both Tommy Lee and Harrison are two actors who seem like they really hate the fact that they're actors. You know, they just hate the fact that they're famous and actors, and they're just like, why did I choose to do this? And then they just go and do it, and they're so incredible at it. But you get that, they're both kind of grumpy, is my
Isn't
point.
that funny? They are very similar. They both have that everyman quality, gruff, rugged, strong, heroic, reluctant heroes maybe, but they do have a lot of that. People of character.
Yeah.
Yes.
Why am I famous? Why do I have to be famous? So one of Gerard's lines later that shows this just like dogged determination, he says, somebody else, when he jumps off the dam, they go, he's fish food. He says, okay, go get a cane pole and catch the fish that ate him.
Right.
We're not giving up. A lot of the times the people would have gone, oh, it's over. He died in the train crash, or he's this or that. He's like, okay, then we're not giving up. Turn off the water. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. We're going to find this man, because he doesn't care whether he did it or not. I'm just going to bring him in.
Which also, this is another point I haven't actually verbalized yet. That's part of what makes a really tense, tight story, especially an action story, is when you feel like the odds are insurmountable. And they kept doing that. Gerard's not going to quit. How in the world is Richard Kimball going to get out of this? Because it's one thing after another. It keeps escalating. His opponent is not going to back down no matter what happens. You kept getting that sense of it's insurmountable. How could you get out of this?
Talk about putting your main character in a tree and throwing rocks at him.
Yes.
I have a question for you. Why do you think that Gerard, this is backing up a little bit, in the shootout with Copeland, why do you think he's wearing that dumb hat? What's your opinion? Because that's something that Mom asked me. She's like, why is he wearing that hat? Do you want to hear my opinion?
I would like to, because I don't really know that I have one.
I think he is getting ready to murder someone in cold blood. And I think that dumb hat offsets this murderous action.
Oh.
I think it gives a little humor.
Kind of like what Harrison Ford said when he was talking about the scene in Indiana Jones, right? In Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Where he takes out I'm getting ready to shoot this man.
Yes, he said he had to look goofy otherwise because he was getting ready to shoot somebody in cold blood.
Yeah, I think that's why.
Interesting.
Because if he just had no hat on, had that look, that Tommy Lee Jones serious look, you're like, oh my gosh, he just killed that man. But that hat just gives that touch of whimsy, or that touch of the ridiculous that it doesn't...
Something that distracted.
It doesn't settle in your brain like, oh my gosh.
And they moved on so quickly.
Very fast.
Because you're right. Had we lingered, we would have been like, what in the world? Yeah. Well, goodness. We obviously have a lot to say about this movie.
So we were right to make it two parts because we're on our side. It's already like over 30 minutes for us talking about this.
Which seems like maybe a good time to take a break.
Yeah, let's go. Let's go ahead and do that.
All right.
Listen up, ladies and gentlemen. Our podcast has been on the internet for 36 months. Average listening speed over uneven life space, barring electronic difficulties, is 1 episode a week. That gives us roughly 160 episodes. What I want from each and every one of you is a hard target search on either YouTube, Spotify, Podbean, Podchaser, Amazon Podcast, iHeart Podcast, or Apple Podcasts in your area. Once found, leave a 5-star review on every application. Your podcast name is Scandal Water. Go get them.
And we are back.
Okay, before we hop in, I got to give a shout out. You know, I like the little tiny characters too.
Okay.
So I don't know who the guy was, but it's this perfect delivery of this background guy where he goes, I'll notify the press. No press. Right, no press.
Yes.
That was such a perfect exchange. And I think that may
Yes.
be that man's only line. So shout out to you, sir. That gave me a chuckle.
It did. I laughed as well, and I remember it. You know, we had left off, I think, at the scene at the dam. Was that?
Yes, yes.
Can I say, I only had a few things about this movie that I
That
questioned.
he would never have survived that?
He would not have
Never.
survived that.
He would be fish food.
That was the speed moment of jumping that
Yes,
huge chasm.
yes.
I was kind of like,
Really?
No.
Even when he falls, he's like, I thought if it was a dummy or whoever they threw off of that thing.
It was a dummy.
It had to be because
Yeah.
his little leg and his head, and I was like, dude, dude, you had to cut away from that because he clearly was not going to survive this.
Yeah, I mean, it was scary. Like when they showed cinematography, the angle was great. It was scary. Like it was very action packed and impactful. But I was like, no,
Not gonna happen.
Can I say one other
Absolutely, you can.
complaint?
Yes, you can. Of course.
Did this bother you as well?
What?
I could not help it. This was the one, other than Copeland, which they addressed.
Yeah.
This was my other huge distractor. Richard Kimball is one man who committed murder. I mean, from their opinion, right? We know he's wrongly accused. They don't. Do we have
enough
money? Do we have enough money to have helicopters, drones, divers, dogs, no telling how many people, like choppers closing down tunnels?
Yeah.
I mean, like it was crazy. The amount of resources that were poured into capturing one man.
This one fella.
Who was accused of murdering his wife. We have a lot of people who've committed more murders than that. Who might be on the loose.
Yes.
Come on. Did that not bother you?
To me, sometimes when stuff like that comes up and I enjoy the movie anyway, I'll just say, somebody will say, why does it happen that way? And I'll go, because the writer wanted it to. It's just, we gotta
you have to suspend your disbelief. You have to go with it because it wouldn't have been the same movie, but it was there in the back of my mind. And it was just, a new thing would happen and he'd be like, call out the divers, call out the, and I'd be like,
why haven't they turned off the water yet?
Yes, exactly.
On a
Shut down
dam.
the whole dam because one guy who jumped off a cliff and is probably dead might not be.
And he wasn't.
That's right. Okay. All right.
funny.
Sorry, I had to bring that up because
No,
it
that's
bugged
funny.
me.
That's
All right.
okay.
Okay. What was your next note?
Let's see. I wrote, there's no way he'd be able to, we talked before the break about investigating at the hospital because of the security now. I mean, no way he'd be able to walk in there. And I liked how, I don't know what it was a photo of, but Gerard has photos taped to his office window to remind him of the case. He's looking at it. He's thinking. Something else, going back to the hospital, I was really glad that I watched it with closed captions because all of these years, I have never known why all those kids were there. And it says, big bus crash. But I didn't hear it or I didn't understand what they were saying. So I was like, oh, that's why that little boy is there. And it's so busy. I kept wondering, why are they overrun with children that are injured? I just didn't understand what the occasion was.
And isn't it interesting now that we know, like, okay, it's another opportunity for Richard Kimball to show how heroic he is and his willingness to put himself at risk to save somebody else. But it also would have been, here's the big romantic love scene. Here's your chance to meet up with Julianne Moore's character.
I'm so glad they cut that because not only have we spent this whole film saying how much he loves his wife, he's pursuing his wife's killer. He is wounded. He is emotionally and physically damaged and drained. He does not have time for a lady friend.
I did not corroborate this, but one source said they, for a brief time, considered his having a romantic relationship with Jane Lynch's character.
No.
I know.
No.
But I did wonder. Okay, I know, but it was 1993, and well, I mean, I'm not saying it'd be different now. But part of it, I'm sure, was we think there's a box office draw for Harrison Ford to have a romantic interest in some lady. They probably were just thinking about that in general. But I did wonder. It was also the thing back in that 1960s series. They said,
really? Oh, that's right. You said
episode after episode, he would get involved with some lady and then move on.
Well, I mean, it was 4 years. He had a longer time to be on the road. This is months.
Right.
This character, and that's one of the reasons Harrison agreed to do this. I think I saw on the behind the scenes. I didn't write this down, but that they originally wanted it to be a series. We're going to do a series of films, and Harrison was like, no, one film, film, and I'm done.
I mean, I know you agree with me. I'm stating the obvious, but it would have ruined this movie.
Yes,
we would. I mean, if he had any type of romantic involvement with anybody, I don't believe anymore that you care that much about your wife.
Yep.
I'm not rooting for you anymore.
Yep. I'd always heard the rumor that there was a romantic relationship written in between Tom Cruise's character and Demi Moore's character in A Few Good Men, and that they had a scene. And I always thought that would ruin it too.
Yeah.
It doesn't. We don't need that. That's not what our story is about.
It would have. Not only do we not need it, that would have ruined everything. Yeah. In this case, it would have ruined everything.
But when he is at the hospital, I wrote, nobody notices the janitor.
Yeah.
They don't. Yeah. So there you go. And the little boy's name, where he says Joel, bye-bye Joel, according to IMDb, the actor's name was Joel.
I saw that.
So sweet.
He was a cutie.
He was a cutie. So this too, no human in their right mind is going to stand right here when they know they're in trouble. She's like, stand right here. And she takes his badge. Like, okay, I'll wait for you to call somebody and come get me. No.
Sure. Yeah.
I've only been running all this time and a pretty lady says, stand right here. Okay, let me get caught. No.
Which, by the way, I couldn't help it. I'm like, everybody's so young. I'm like, oh, look at her. What was your next note?
I like that the St. Patrick's Day parade was real.
I did too.
And they just jumped in it. Harrison says it took him a while to get recognized because he had his dark hair and the hats, and they just jumped in with the plumbers union. They knew it was going to happen, so they wanted to get in on it. Like, what's the next set piece that they can almost have him lose him?
Right. Yeah, they said Tommy Lee Jones was actually the one who was more recognizable because he was drawing attention to himself by jumping around.
Right.
But yeah, the fact that these two famous actors could both just blend into this crowd, that was so cool.
And I love how 3 cops get in the elevator with him. He's just like, hey, everybody.
You know, another nice choice, right? The fact that this is such a tense, action-packed movie that is such a serious topic, such a serious situation, and they did find all those nice little moments to add humor.
They did.
Yeah.
Like the hinky conversation. Did you like the hinky? Why do you say hinky? I don't know. It's just a word that we say. It's hinky. It's like, I don't like you people using words that don't have any meaning. I'm taking the stairs. Who takes the stairs also? Did you see how many sets of stairs there were?
You pay attention sometimes to details that I don't pay attention to. I totally missed that.
I've seen this umpteenth amount of times. So, but anyway, I liked it how Gerard was going up and Kimball was going down.
Oh, okay.
You know, they're on the steps, and
Are
both of them chose to take the steps. Interesting. Not the elevator, the stairs. Okay, for anybody who's seen the movie Regarding Henry, tell me that his blue shirt and brown jacket don't look like the character from Regarding Henry. Have you seen that film?
No.
Okay, so it's another excellent film, but he plays a character who is kind of a jerk at the start of the film. He goes to a convenience store and he gets
traumatic brain injury.
He has a traumatic brain injury from a botched robbery, and his outfit looks exactly like that. It looks like he's also filming Regarding Henry and was like, oh, I gotta go finish The Fugitive real fast. I'll try to find a picture of him from that, and I will post it on our show notes to go Regarding Henry, The Fugitive.
Okay, yeah.
Same. Was he doing it at the same time? Anyway, that was just something funny to me. Did you also notice continuity that his hair is now much lighter when he breaks into Sykes' home?
I did notice his hair.
I wondered, is that time passing again? Because we've pretty well done this. If they shot this in order, it's going in order, or or is it just a continuity error?
I assumed it was continuity because I had the impression that everything is just one thing after another, that we really haven't had that much time passing.
Well, think about it though. If it was January when the bus crash happened and we've just had the St. Patrick's Day parade.
Oh, you're right.
It's been 3 months. He lived in the Polish woman's basement, which was another fake out.
Oh, they got me on that one too.
Did they really?
Yeah.
That was another fake out. So I think it's time passing. I think that in the hair dye, I don't know if it was a permanent color, but it could have washed out.
Which, by the way, I'm not a fan of Harrison Ford with really dark hair.
No, he doesn't look good.
It does not work for me.
That's not your look, boo. No. Old tech.
I saw several. I had that note too.
Notes being sent to hotels for you to call back via hotel phone. The DOS computer system.
Yes, I was dying over that. The fax.
Yeah, the fax machine.
Oh, yeah.
I like how they fake us out again because Harrison calls Gerard and they're like, keep him on the phone, stretch it out. And he says, you weren't trying to solve a puzzle, but I am. You think he's going to hang up the phone. He does not.
I know. So smart. And that's the thing. Again, we keep repeating this idea. These men are so equally matched.
Yes.
They're both so smart, so clever, so dogged, so determined. They are really like parallel, dimensions of each other.
Guys, in the movies, if a person says, I've never seen that person in my life before, they are always lying. Always lying.
Why did you go so hard on that? Why?
I've never seen that person before in my life. Really? Okay. Yeah. So you just saw him. And what did he say when you saw him? Okay, here we go. Another small character that I was just like, you know what? Bones' job. I like Bones' job. It's quiet. It's organized. He gets to wear a t-shirt and a cardigan, a sweater to work. So thinking of it earlier, clearly two sides of my personality. It's maybe I work Bones' job during the week and I work for Gerard on the weekend.
Oh, okay.
Because you got the quiet and then you got the excitement. You know, it's just
when would you get a break?
I don't know. I don't need a break. At night. At 9 to 5.
Yeah.
9 to 5 for both the guys. And then I wrote maybe I'd like to be Gerard because what a commanding presence and what a good boss he was. I admire that.
He was a good boss, but I don't want to be in his situations. No.
But you didn't have to clock in. It wasn't like I got to show up to my job and it's the same every day. You never know what you're going to do. You're going to get on a helicopter. You're going to get on a plane.
You're going to shoot at people.
Well, that part. And get shot at.
Yes. See, no.
Okay, you've talked me out of it. This is something funny when we're watching it. And when the cop is killed on the subway, Brian looks at me and he goes, "Isn't that guy that swept floors on the sitcom you used to watch?" I was like, "You gotta give me more than that." But it's janitor from Scrubs, Neil Flynn.
Yeah, and
I didn't recognize him.
And didn't he end up also, oh, I don't remember my note. I feel like because of this role, they said he ended up getting a part in U.S. Marshals or something else.
Really?
Yeah, I could be wrong on that.
That's cool.
Don't hold me to that.
Okay, here's another quote. When the doctor, the good doctor, is giving his little speech and he says, "Provasic has no side effects whatsoever." I wrote, "Please." That's when you know it's a lie. All drugs have side effects. Even Tylenol and ibuprofen affect your liver. Ask me how I know. You know?
Right.
It just does.
You know, that was a thing too. It was a struggle to figure out how to end this and how to have the big climax.
Yes.
That was something that I saw in one of my sources. I didn't write the notes down, but Jeb talked about that. Like, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? And when they finally came upon this idea, it was like last minute and it was like it just kind of filled in and it was like, this is it. This is the most satisfying way because this is a man who everybody believes to be guilty, to be a murderer. What better way for him to clear himself
Then in front of everyone.
than publicly in front of all his peers, everybody who he wants to have, you know, their respect.
Yes, and I said that spotlight operator was like, "This is my moment. I am following the action." Because he says, "Can we go over to the side here and talk?" And the spotlight operator's like, "Nope, I'm going to follow. What's going to happen? Let's all see together." I thought that was funny.
Yeah. Gosh, it was satisfying.
It was.
It was.
I really like that we had the moment for Gerard to tell Richard he knew he was innocent. I think this is the counterbalance to the "I don't care" moment. And it is when Richard finally does stop running and he says, "They killed my wife." And Sam says, "I know it, Richard. I know it." So beautiful.
It really was. Which, I mean, my big satisfying moment was when they're in the car.
Yes.
And they had the callback.
Yes.
And he gives them, was it an ice pack or something?
It is.
And he says, "I thought you didn't care." And he says,
I don't tell anybody.
Don't
okay?
tell anybody. I was like, oh.
They're going to be best friends and play bridge every Saturday.
I want them to.
They're gonna be.
Yes. Talk about a satisfying ending because every single, well, other than the fact that he still doesn't have his wife, which is devastating. But other than that, every single loose end is tied up in the best possible way. Every bit of it. I loved it. Loved it. Loved it.
Armchair psychologist.
So for our armchair, I thought I would share this quote from Roger Ebert, who wrote this back when it came out, when he, by the way, gave the movie a 4-star review.
As you should.
And he said, "Thrillers are a much debased genre these days, depending on special effects and formula for much of their content. The Fugitive has the standards of an earlier, more classic time, when acting, character, and dialogue were meant to stand on their own, and where characters continued to change and develop right up until the last frame. Here is one of the year's best films." I thought, wow, okay, this is a film critic telling us why he loves the movie, and I thought he nailed so many wonderful qualities about it. But since this was your favorite thing,
okay,
we'll end with your opinion.
Oh gosh, okay. Well, thinking about like when I first went into this, I just thought, why do I like this so much? I just like it because of the banter. I like it because of the action. But then after seeing what it took for them to put this film actually together and thinking of it a little more critically, that's one thing that's come from doing this podcast, is you've kind of taught me to think of things a little more critically than I usually would. Like sometimes I'll just watch stuff and turn my brain off and I just enjoy it. There it is.
Which is okay.
It's okay. Yeah. But learning to think about things and why do you like it? So to me, there are some movies that just don't feel like movies, but more like real life. And while all these scenes feel authentic, specifically the ones with Gerard have the feel of a documentary. Like the camera just happens to catch what's going on.
Yeah.
And there are certain films that I think remain rewatchable because there's so much going on. You can watch it for any reason you want. You've got the plot, you've got editing, you've got cinematography, you've got acting, you've got character, you've got writing, you've got quotability, music, background. It stays entertaining and it stays compelling. And for me, The Fugitive is one of those films.
Nice.
That's it.
Well, that brings us to our cheers.
All right.
So you get to call it. What are we going to cheers, Ashley?
Oh my goodness. This is the, I don't know how to single anybody out. This was a team effort and it was so compelling, but I just don't think it would be the same without Harrison and Tommy Lee. So I'm going to cheers them.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
Cheers to you guys.
Cheers, guys.
If you love what we do, please rate and review our show. Or you can become a supporter by making a donation through buymeacoffee.com/scandalwaterpod. Whether a single gift or a recurring monthly donation, it would go a long way towards supporting our work and allowing us to keep the tea brewing.
At our website, www.scandalwaterpodcast.com, you can submit questions or your own story ideas, access our sources and show notes, see the merch we offer for sale, and more. You can join the Scandal Water community through our Scandal Water Podcast Facebook page or follow us on Instagram or TikTok at Scandal Water Podcast.
This episode was executive produced by Candy Thomas, that's me, and Ashley Raymer Brown.
That's me.
It was researched and written by Candy Thomas and edited by Ashley Raymer Brown.
A special thank you to Josh Martin, who wrote, composed, and performed the Scandal Water theme and other music, Matt C. Adams, who created the artwork, and Joshua Reith, who designed our website and provides ongoing technical support.
As a reminder, this podcast is purely for entertainment purposes. The thoughts and opinions of the host during each episode of Scandal Water are their own and do not reflect the opinions of any future guests, advertisers, or clearly professional psychologists. Thanks for listening.